and mathematics of intelligent design. She offers sound baths and education at various locations around the Twin Cities. And she's been here several times conducting the sound service at 9 a.m. So Lake Harriet Spiritual Community, help me welcome Kristen Wertenberger.
Awesome. Thank you. You know I'm gonna hug you. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here this morning. Just to let you know about upcoming things before we get started with our talk. So yes, I do practice sound healing. I actually offer it every Wednesday at Wellspring Health Center in Eden Prairie at 7. And this Wednesday, we're doing a special thing for Valentine's Day, an opportunity to connect with your partner on a deeper level and really give you an opportunity to like have meaningful conversation. We really wanted to invite couples specifically, which typically I would lean towards, let's do all things self-love, but I really love the idea of people getting to connect with their partner in the way that sound healing offers. So if you're looking for something to do Wednesday, we would love to see you and your partner at our Valentine's Day sound healing this Wednesday. Aside from that, I'm kind of around town, different places, but every Wednesday at 7 at Wellspring. Lisa is actually here from Wellspring, and she has flyers if you guys are interested in that. And then you can follow anything I'm doing on any of my social media accounts. It's all at Sounds Like Kristen. Okay, that's out of the way. So let's get down to it. So I was catching up with a friend of mine mid to late January, and she had just led her very first wellness retreat, like destination wellness retreat. So we were catching up on that, and we were kind of saying, you know, looking at the future, what are things that you would like to be manifesting? And one of the things that I had said, initially I had thought wellness retreats would be part of it, but the thing that really stood out for me was, I'd really like to do more public speaking. And so I shared that with her that day. And the next day, I got an email from Gary saying, hey, you want to speak next month? And I was like, awesome. That's exactly what I was just talking about. So I'm a big believer that all things are divinely guided. You being here today is divinely orchestrated. And so I hope that whatever you're seeking today is here for you. I know that it's here for you. And so, you know, my goal is just to be of service to something greater and help inspire you guys along the way. So thank you so much for being here. And I also want to say that, you know, what I'm sharing with you guys today is very much based upon my personal experience and my personal healing journey and the things that have really worked for me. And I think that when we share authentically as ourselves, any of us who have been on that healing journey, we have things to share with others. And when we open ourselves up and we share from that part of ourself, that healed part, you never know what the universe has in store. So every single person who's been on that healing journey today has something to share in this regard. I just so happen to be invited up here to share with you guys. So again, thank you so much for being here. And to get started, I just want to let you guys know, as far as the sound healing piece goes, I was raised in a super musical family. So both my parents were in singing groups in college. They had so I'm the youngest of 4. There are 6 of us total in the family. Me and all my siblings, it was, you're going to play an instrument. We don't care what instrument, you pick it, but you're going to play one. So everybody played an instrument, and we also sang. We actually sang as a family of 6. So my parents would each take a harmony, and then the 4 kids would be on the melody. So we would be doing 3-part harmony as our little family of 6. As the youngest, I never got to the age where it was like, I didn't want anybody to see me up there singing with my family, because we were probably done with that by the time I was in like 5th or 6th grade. I mean, occasionally we would all get together and like, you know, just sing for people here and there. But so probably 2 years ago, when I was 3, we made a VHS tape for my grandparents' anniversary. And each one of us like did our special little talent, and mine, I decided I was gonna sing. So we have my very first song that I ever wrote recorded on this VHS tape. And Also on that tape is our family of 6 singing. And so one thing that I had done a few years ago was we had some cassette tapes recorded of our family singing, and I had taken those and digitized all of them and given them to my parents for Christmas. And I got the award for the tearful gift that year, which is always a bonus when you can make your mom and dad cry. So I had thought, we have this VHS tape, why don't I convert that to a digital form, and then I can send it to everyone. So we had this thing, I keep pointing over here because my wife Rachel is sitting right up here. And so we had gotten this thing to convert VHS tapes into digital. And so I got this tape from my mom, and I got a video of it on my phone, and I sent it to all my siblings. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, we're getting this on, digital recording from this old school VHS tape. And, my family responds, whatever. And then my oldest sister sends me a separate text, and all it says is #triggered. Right? So I actually texted her when I was prepping for this just to say, hey, fill me in a little more about that. One thing that I did, the topic this month is transforming your triggers. So that's why I wanted to share that story. I also, just this past holiday season, I saw a quote from Ram Dass that said, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. No one can trigger us quite like our family. And so first thing I want to do is really talk about triggers, because I had sent a message to a friend of mine, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and I said something about triggers, and she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And there are some people in here who may not know when we say that you're triggered or we're talking about triggers, you may not know exactly what those are. So I do want to talk about specifically, like, what are we talking about when we're talking about being triggered? So one thing that I did, like I told you, I reached out to my sister and I said, hey, talk to me more about, when you said #triggered, like what was that? So I just sort of engaged a few people who I have these type of conversations with. Before speaking, I thought, I just want to talk to people about triggers and see sort of like what common things come up. So, a big thing that comes up is, well, a trigger is something that like puts you into a negative headspace. That starts, triggers you into the space where you're perceiving things from a negative point of view. We'll get into this whole negative thing here in a little bit. The other thing is that triggers are when you're in the space of what we would call the small I, or the little self, rather than the big self and the bigger picture. And so we feel triggers, and triggers are those things that sort of, it's the subconscious programming of the mind is really what it is. It's that sort of that automatic way of perceiving. And it is laid down at a very early age. Typically, by age 7, most of our subconscious programming has been laid down. And so it's a way that we perceive and we process that we don't even have conscious awareness of until we start to say, why am I doing this? Why am I reacting this way to these certain things? We just got a puppy back in October, and you can see physically when he is in his automatic animal instinct mind versus when he is consciously present with us. That's one thing we're working on right now when we go to the park is, having him be able to come back from that animal instinct back to where he's conscious of where he's at and what he's doing. We do the exact same thing. So we can function very much in our automatic programming and just going through life the way that, we've been programmed to perceive and doing things the way that we've done them because that's how we've always done them. Or we can step in and we can say, okay, I can consciously choose here how I want to react to this. I can consciously choose how I want to program my mind. Because we have neuroplasticity, which is a beautiful thing. So I'm going to take a quick drink here. Personal trigger story. Yes, I do still get triggered. It's one of those things where it's a constant practice, and these are laid in us at such a young age that we are working through these things constantly. But as we work through them, the waves become a little less and a little less. So earlier this week, we were walking the dog over at Centennial Lakes, and for Christmas, one of the things I had gotten Rachel was a gift card for a day spa. And I had looked at their menu and I thought, she would probably like for me to just set this entire thing up. But the menu was so extensive that I thought if it were me, I would probably want to pick and choose the things that I get to do. So I thought, I'm just going to get her the gift card and then she can pick and choose. So we're on this walk at Centennial, and we were talking about, she made the comment, I'd really like to go get a facial. And I said, well, I got you that gift card, just set it up. You can go anytime. She's like, I just wish you would have set it up for me so I didn't have to think about it. Triggered, totally triggered. What I had done was not enough, right? That is literally what had been triggered in me. And even right after that, I had said, I'm triggered right now. I am triggered in the space that feeling like what I have done is not enough. So that's kind of how it works. She was not at all saying that I hadn't done enough, but that was how I perceived it because I have some programming that tells me that things that I do aren't enough. And there are deep-seated programs that we all have. A lot of times they have to revolve around our own personal worth, around our self-love, around much deeper things than what the triggers themselves are. So a trigger is essentially an external experience or an experience that triggers a specific neural pathway in our mind. And that neural pathway triggers a physiological response in the body. So let's talk about what is happening in the body, because that is something we can all connect to our physical body because it's the space that we all live in. So earlier I mentioned, a trigger being something that puts you in a negative space. So anybody in here familiar with heart math? A few people, okay. So I love the terminology that heart math uses. Heart math talks about things in terms of depletion and renewal. Because when we talk about things as energy, there are responses, nervous system responses, biological, physiological responses that are depleting, and then responses that are renewing. So when we talk about a trigger, the way that I think is a healthier way to think about it is to think about a trigger is something that sends you into a pattern of depletion, okay? So, and the reason that happens is because of stress hormones. So when we get into that triggered space, our nervous system is feeling like it has to survive. It's feeling like we have to defend, like we have to protect ourselves. So there's a physiological response of hormones in our body that happens when we are triggered. And so, again, when we think of this in terms of physiologically what's happening, we are in a depleted or depleting state when we're triggered. And so there are levels that this happens at. I think of everything, as a person who practices sound, I think of everything as waves or oscillations because I work very much according to space. When we work with sound, we're really working with space. So, and when we explore, quantum physics and things like that, we live in a world of waves or a world of oscillations. And so with triggers, we can feel how extreme a trigger is based upon how that wave feels. So we have ripples in calm water. Ripple, not so bad. That's one of those things that if I feel a ripple, this is ridiculous, but sometimes I don't want to go to the grocery store just because I don't want to. That's why things like Instacart exist, because people don't want to go to the grocery sometimes. I don't have an Instacart account. I always go to the grocery. But when I get into the space where I'm feeling kind of annoyed, I have to go to the grocery, it's a ripple. And so I can use a tool where I just shift into gratitude, right? I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to go and buy this fresh food, and that I have this car that I can drive to the grocery, and that I have this food accessible, and that I can afford to buy this food and nourish my body in this way. Ripples, that level of trigger can very easily be worked through with something like, a mantra or a gratitude practice. Then we have like high tide. Okay, waves are a little bigger. And with something like that, typically expressing how you feel is important. Earlier this week with, the spa experience where I was triggered, I needed to express how I felt. And so, that's sort of our mid-level trigger. And then we have like our tsunamis. And those are ones that just come in and it's like they completely knock you off center, and it's a lot. So I actually had an experience, 4 or 5 years ago. Somewhere around there. And I was out snow blowing, like our driveway, and a gentleman had come walking down the sidewalk, and he was an older guy and had his dog on a leash and got to like real close to where I was snow blowing, and I actually had stopped to let him pass, and he slipped on the ice and fell and dropped his dog's leash, and I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? I grabbed his dog, I helped the guy get up, and then, he seemed okay and he went along his way. So I go back to snow blowing, and wouldn't you know it, 2 minutes later, I wipe out and I fall smack on my butt. And I was like, just super frustrated. And I don't know what happened when I landed on my tailbone, but I got I was super angry. And honestly, I went into the garage. Rachel probably remembers this because she was in the house. But I'm a sound person. I move energy with sound. So I use toning, I use grunting, I use sound to move energy. And so I was super angry. And so I literally just went in the garage and yelled. There wasn't anything in particular that I was angry about. Like, yes, I had been annoyed that I had fallen, but I just needed to yell. Sometimes you just got to do something to move the energy. It wasn't directed at anyone. It wasn't, Rachel heard it though. She came out and she was like, is everything okay? And I was like, I'm just angry. I had no idea why. Now, I could tell you I'm a big believer that the body holds trauma. And there was probably something that got knocked loose when I fell. And I had been holding anger somewhere, and that anger finally was allowed to move. So I actually ended up being really grateful that whole thing happened. But that was like a tsunami trigger. And it wasn't even necessarily anything that happened engaging with anyone. It was like a physical, okay, we're gonna move something here. But so those levels of trauma, or those levels of triggers, we feel those different levels of triggers. And so what we're talking about today is really how to transform that stuff. And I'm going to tell you something that you might not really want to hear, but this is a simple fact. In order to transform a trigger, you have to be triggered. Sucks, right? But in that moment, you get triggered, and that is the moment where you make the change. Because if you're never triggered, you never know if you transform it. You have to be triggered in order to transform a trigger. It's neuroplasticity. It's coming to that point of making that choice. It's when you choose, am I going to go to my animal instinct that's subconscious programming? Or am I going to consciously step in here as the higher mind and choose how I respond to this? In order to transform a trigger, you have to be triggered. I know, might not sound fun, but we do have things like sound healing, like hypnotherapy, like all of the things that work with our subconscious mind, where we can get to that, we can consciously choose to go into that space where we meet our triggers and we say, okay, I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to choose a new neural pathway. So when we talk about transforming triggers and we come to that point, first thing we have to do, breathe. You gotta breathe. That is a nervous system thing. So a lot of times when we're triggered, when we're stressed, when those things come up, the first thing we do is we stop breathing, or we change the way we're breathing. We go to that really short, stressed breath. So has anybody in here happened to watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Amazon Prime? Just came out like a week or two ago. Well, I'm a huge Donald Glover fan. I love Donald Glover, and he's the main actor in it. It's basically, the old Mr. and Mrs. Smith was Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. They were both spies. So this is like sort of a spin on that. They're both spies and, married. They're pretending to be married, whatever. But there is a part in that where they get together with another couple of Smiths, and interesting mindset in these people. They're basically hired killers. And they're meeting with these other Smiths, and the guy is talking about how extreme, basically, of the situations they work in, because the main characters I can't remember what their risk level is, but then the Smiths who they get together with are considered high risk or extremely high risk, something like that. And so the visiting Smith, the gentleman, he says, I'm going to tell you the secret to getting out of any situation, no matter how tight it is. And they're like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, any situation. Breathe. And it's funny because, later in the episode, they kind of make a joke about that, but that is so profound. Because when we breathe, we actually have a major effect on our nervous system. And it's called the coherent breath or resonant breathing. Has anybody read the book Breath by James Nestor? Highly recommend that book. If you haven't read it, it was a 2020 bestseller. He gets into the science of breathing in that book. And there's one particular part where he talks about the resonant breath. The resonant breath is at a rate of 5.5 breaths per minute. We're going to practice this breath at the end of this. It's at a rate of 5.5 breaths per minute. And the cool thing is that, he studied all of these spiritual traditions. So he talks about like the rosary and these Tibetan monk chants and all of these different things that if you time them, they're all very closely timed to that 5.5 breaths per minute breathing rate. And the reason that is such a big deal, it actually connects with heart math, where we generate coherence in the body when we breathe at that breath rate. So it syncs up our breath, our nervous system, our blood pressure, all of those things sort of click into place when we breathe at that rate, and things start working together, as opposed to mind is going to do this, heart is going to do this, blood will flow this way. We're saying, okay, everything's got to work together here. We need internal harmony. So breathing is a huge step. When you get to that point where you are triggered, first thing you got to do is breathe. The same sister who sent me the #triggered text, she called me one time. They were moving last summer, and she was super worked up, and I could hear it. And I literally just said, Erin, you got to breathe. Breathe. Before you do anything, breathe. So breathing can help us when we get to that point where we're triggered, but we're talking about transforming that trigger. So breathing can definitely help you manage a trigger. But we really want to transform a trigger. So when you get to that point where you are triggered and you recognize it, you can recognize when you're triggered. We know what that feels like. And so in that moment, you do have to become aware, and breathing will help you become aware. So once you're aware, that's when, yes, there is a surface level trigger, but that is always a surface level trigger. There is something much deeper always going on. And so at that point, you have to dive in. And you have to say, what is this? How am I really feeling? Like I said, the other day when we were walking and the spa thing came up, I was annoyed and I was angry, like, oh, I did this and now, but that's not what the deeper level thing was. And again, I've been doing this work long enough to be able to recognize very quickly, oh, this has to do with me not feeling like I've done enough. So that was one story. Another story, and this one lasted substantially longer because I was not aware of what had been triggered. And it took me a while to figure it out. So I mentioned earlier that we got a puppy in October. And anybody in here ever had a puppy? Yeah, it's a lot, right? Like, you don't sleep the same, you have this, new, I've had a dog before, but it's a lot of work. And it had been 3.5 years since we lost our other dog, and now we're bringing this new one in, so it's a big change. On top of that, we committed to get this dog before ever meeting him. That was a very much like trusting spirit sort of a deal. Just the way that things happened, it was like, no, we know this is our dog. But as soon as we decided we were gonna get this dog, my anxiety was like, oh my gosh, we're getting this dog, So we get the dog, and he's awesome and great, but for the first 2 months, oh my goodness, I was in a space where every little thing was just triggering. And I was aware of it, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. And finally, one day, something had happened. I don't even remember what it was, but Rachel was like, that's it, that right there, that short time. And I'm very fortunate to have a partner who we help one another very much in this situation. And so she had pointed something out, like my short reaction time to something, and she was like, what is that? This is where you have to dive in, right? It just took me, a month and a half, 2 months, something, to really dive into this. So I'm gonna share this because this is an example of subconscious programming that I had no awareness of at the time that had triggered me. And I had to get to the point where I said, okay, what is really going on here? So she's like, well, when did you start feeling, triggered like this? And I said, the day we decided we were gonna get the puppy. And I said, my anxiety just went up. And I said, since then, I've just been like on edge and just feeling like anxious. And she's like, okay, so what is it about getting the puppy? And I was like, so I'm gonna share with you guys my process here. So at first it was, just the anxiety of the unknown. We're bringing this dog into our house. I don't know this dog. I have no idea how he's gonna be. There's the fear of the unknown. And then it turned into, well, this dog is a reflection of me, and so if anything is wrong with this dog, if this dog isn't perfect, it means that I'm not perfect. And then it took me to the space of a parent-child relationship, where it was a reflection, recognizing that I had inherited a subconscious belief that if a child isn't a reflection of perfection, there's something wrong with the parent. When my sister sent me that text that said #triggered, and I messaged her saying, hey, fill me in a little about this, that storyline that I had just recently worked through of a perfect kid means a perfect parent, that is exactly what my sister texted me, was this need for things to appear perfect. And that is, I can see that as like an ancestral, generational pattern that has been passed down and passed down and passed down. I don't even have a human child, I just have a puppy, and that was triggered. So, I can't imagine what my siblings have gone through. But that's an example of diving in. It would have been easy for me to say, I'm anxious because things with this dog are unknown, but it was so much deeper than that. And mind you, when all of this is coming up, all of the emotions are coming with it too, right? Like working through the familial patterns and the subconscious programming, it doesn't always feel very good, but when we get to the back side of that, we feel so much lighter. And so transforming a trigger, you gotta get to the root of what that trigger is. And if you're not willing to dive in, then you're just gonna keep working up here when the real problem's under here. That being said, I do wanna talk about, we'll get into sort of the next phase, but I do wanna talk about the need for triggers. The biosphere in Arizona Surely some of you in here know about like the Arizona biosphere that they built, like a whole, and you know about the trees falling over? Do you know about that? Yeah. So they built this whole biosphere to basically, for scientists to study, like the whole idea was if we built something to live in on Mars or something like that. So they built this whole biosphere, and basically trees are growing, but then they're just falling over. They're not diseased, nothing's wrong with them. They can't figure out why these trees are falling over. And then eventually they realized, one of the elements we forgot to recreate in the biosphere was the wind. You have to have wind for the roots to grow deeper. You have to have wind so that you get a little resistance, so that you can develop resilience and strength, and you can continue growing. Because if you don't develop those roots and you don't develop that resilience and that strength, you're going to fall over. We need some stress in our world. We need things that will push us. Yes, waves. Exactly. Like, it's necessary. It's a necessary thing to keep us growing. And, I worked with a business coach several years back, and I got to the point in that business coaching where I recognized it was really happening for me at a point where things in my consciousness were shifting very quickly, and I realized, yes, I can do all this work on my business in the way that you traditionally work on a business, but I knew that the work that I really needed to do was in me. And so we made a switch at that point, and we shifted from business to personal coaching. And one of the things that came up was recognizing that when you are getting, and I speak of things in terms of music all the time. When we're going through our personal growth and expansion, and that happens as we go through our healing, I like to think of it as, harmonic by harmonic or octave by octave. We expand, like our rings, like the ripples in the water. You just keep expanding and expanding. And when you get to that edge where you're about to have a breakthrough into the next octave or the next harmonic, that is when the greatest pressure pushes back. That is when you are going to be right on the edge of your triggers. Because in order to get to that next level, you got to do some more harmonizing internally. That's just the way it works. I mean, that's even, when you think about electromagnetism, you think about fields like the ionosphere. Basically the border is where you have the highest charge. The highest potential is right at the edge. But in order to break through to that next higher harmonic or to that next octave, you have to have that pressure. You have to have that pushback. And you can recognize when you are triggered, you can recognize that as an opportunity for growth. You can recognize that as your wind that's going to deepen the roots so that you can keep growing. Cool? Cool. So, when we're triggered, we breathe, and then we dive in, and then we allow. So this isn't to say like, you just allow yourself to be triggered over and over and over. This is, you dive in and you find what the root of that trigger is, and you allow that energy, that emotion, to move, to be expressed. Because if you are always resisting whatever that root cause is, if you're resisting feeling that, you're going to hold on to it. It's going to stay in your system. It's going to hold that pattern. It's going to be continually training your neuroplasticity to perceive in a particular way. So you have to get to the root, and then you have to allow that emotion to be expressed. I like to use the phrase, feel it to heal it, which doesn't always feel great, but it moves that energy. And when we can feel that, when we can allow ourselves to feel those emotions, when we're in a space of conscious awareness, healing happens. And when we get to the root of those things and we allow that healing to happen, it really brings us closer to the center of who we are. And that is 100% divine, unconditional love. And when we can observe our triggers from that space, we offer ourselves deep, deep, deep self-healing. Because it's really about self-love. I mean, that's what the healing journey is all about, is returning to deep, unconditional self-love. So we breathe, we dive in, we find what the real issue is, and we allow ourselves to feel that and to wrap that trigger in unconditional love. I wasn't expecting this. So you can think of transforming a trigger. Again, you got to get to that point where you choose. And in order to keep your mind in the space where you stay conscious, you breathe. And we're going to do that in just a minute here. But I did want to share, because I just feel like it's so relevant when we're talking about reprogramming our minds. That trigger is the point where you, like I said, you choose which direction, if you're going to go in that automated, what's been pre-programmed, or if you're going to stay conscious and you are going to choose to master that. I grew up in, a biblical tradition. And so I very much was raised with the teachings of Jesus. I think there are lots of teachers that have been here, and he just happens to be one of them. And one verse that actually really, I think, is incredibly relevant here. I don't adhere to any particular religious line, but I do seek truth. And there is a specific line that Jesus says in the Bible that is 100% true, and it says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's how we transform. We renew our minds. And there is a biological piece there with neuroplasticity. So this is one of those things where, yes, we can talk about it in a super spiritual, expanded way, but we can also talk about it in terms of biologically what's happening to us. And as we choose to consciously rewire our mind, we are renewed. And the way we perceive changes. And it's a really beautiful thing. So I just want to share with you guys, just because it seemed relevant to me, a poem that probably all of us grew up in school with, "The Road Not Taken" by Robert Frost. Really well-known poem. But when we talk about getting to that point of choosing which neural pathway we're going to take, the road not taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be retelling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Choose which road you're going to take. Breathe so that you stay conscious. Dive into what it is, and then allow yourself to feel and heal. And beautiful things can happen. So I just want to finish this up with taking you guys through the resonant breath, the coherent breath. It's a really, like I said earlier, a specific breath rate. So I'm actually going to put my little AirPod in so that I can have that rhythm. And then we'll get this all going here. So you guys can just make yourselves really comfortable. I'm going to start some undertones here. So this is the kind of stuff when I do sound healing. I mentioned that I work according to spatial design. And overtones and undertones are a big part of that. Okay, so everybody can just go ahead and take a nice deep breath and start tuning in with your body. And I'll count for you guys. And we'll just do a count of 4, inhale, and a count of 4, exhale. Okay, so it's gonna be inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale. Inhale, 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 exhale. Go ahead and take one more nice deep breath. Your breath is your built-in tool. Something we all are given that's there to assist us when we need it. So remember to breathe. And thank you guys so much.
All right, thank you, Kristen, for the reminder about the breath. We've had quite a few speakers that talk about making sure that we breathe, and I think one good benefit, besides some of the things that Kristen talked about, is it brings us right in the present moment. So thank you for that. So you want to take another deep breath? And let it go. All right. All right, well, how do you follow that? Well, I wanted to tell everybody that Lake Harriet Spiritual Community is solely funded by donations and offerings. So we don't have any other source of income, but the generous donations of people that come and the people that are online, who donate online, help keep the doors open, the lights on, and help us to bring speakers like Kristen here often. So if you can donate, the ushers will be passing the baskets in just a moment. I appreciate it. There's a Venmo thingy in the baskets, and you could also donate through PayPal by going to our website and donating that way. So thank you for what you can give.
Took my love and I took it down. I climbed a mountain and I turned around, and I saw my reflection in the snow-covered hills. Well, a landslide will bring it down. Oh, mirror in the sky, what is a love?
I don't know about you, but I've got change fatigue. All right, the ushers can come forward. I don't know. She just asked, "Are you ushers?" Well, yeah, yeah. Okay, if you could help bless the offering by repeating after me. God's perfect love, flowing through me, blesses and multiplies all that I give, all that I receive, and all that I am. Oh. All right, so as our tradition is, we like to circle up, and Kristen will lead us in a closing. I think we've got enough people to circle the center section. All right. And this is always a fun
John.
challenge for the group.
How are you? Good to see you.
I like your time.
All right.
Some questions.
Okay, sure. I like that. Dave. I was gonna say, get right in here. Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you again to everyone for being here this morning. And I would encourage you to talk to the people who are here, because if you're in this space, you probably have wisdom to share as well. So thank you guys so much for showing up and for hearing the call to whatever brought you here today. Remember to breathe and know that you are harmony. You are here by harmony. You are surrounded by harmony. It's just a matter of what your eyes are looking at, and what your ears are tuned into, and what you as a whole are in tune with. But harmony is what holds this entire thing together. So go be that. Aho. Thank you, thank you. Awesome.